structure and flexibility. The RP Diet app builds a structure of eating that creates the results you're looking for, but has the flexibility to let you scan your favorite foods and follow your preferred diet philosophy. The digital diet coach in your pocket is more powerful than ever, so let's build a better you with the RP Diet app.
Folks, Dr. Mike, Dr. James, we got a doozy today. We got like 16 pages of questions, so I think we're just going to rapid fire our way right in. Welcome to the weekly webinar.
Awesome. James, good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend.
Areen MC from Instagram finally found
from Instagram
plus webinar. Yeah, he's from there. Great to see that Areen is joining. Let's get his questions answered. I'm going to answer them super rapid fire, and if James has any thing to interrupt me with, he will absolutely do that if and when he sees fit. So Areen has a bunch of questions. He says, hey Mike and James, if I'm doing 4 sets of dumbbell lat rows, as in rowing an arch instead of straight up, sort of like a lat cable pullover, and 4 sets of wide grip machine rows while standing up straight, would I count those 4 total working sets for the whole back, or 8 sets for the whole back? So I would count them. Myself and James would count them as 8, because we just look, if it's back, we just count it as back. Can you do more advanced counting where you count lats differently than erector stuff and rhomboid stuff and trap stuff? Sure, but that's probably just not worth your time. I would keep it simple and count it as 8. For instance, 4 and 4, both combined. If, at some point, none of these counts are very accurate, because even different rows have different fatigue and stimulus, so the count is super approximate anyway. So anything that involves pulling, we just count as a set.
Baby got back.
Yep. All right, next question. If my minimum effective volume is 10 sets and my MRV is 25 sets, what if instead of going from 10 sets to 25 sets every cycle, I would start from 18 or 16 and maybe add a set or 2 every week, and mainly achieve higher loads from increasing the weight on the bar? What would I miss out on? Well, so a bunch of stuff, and there's a section of the book, How Much Should I Train, that actually literally just addresses that. But just as a sample of what that section says, if you started at 18 or 16, you would be so wildly above your MEV when you began, you would miss out on 2 things. 1, easy, super awesome, no-nonsense, injury-free, easy as shit to actually do growth that occurs between 10 and 17 sets. And 2, you would miss out on something, technically speaking, you could actually not just miss out on, but do the negative effect is you could get insanely sore and do so much damage as to risk injury by restarting a cycle. Like getting into high volume training right away without a ramp is known to cause injury risk increase. And also it would just interfere with hypertrophy. So for a few weeks there at the beginning, you could not be getting much hypertrophy at all, or just the first week, because you started too high. You could also ask the same question again and say, why don't I start at 24, 25 sets in the first week and just manage load from there? And it would be an extreme version of that. So there's a reason we start at MEV, because it's primarily because it's easy gains, and starting any higher is doing a needless amount of damage.
Yeah, and so if you are doing multiple mesocycles in a row, it's feasible that your MEV would start to go up over time, and you were going to auto-regulate at some point. So the meso 1, right, would be like MEV, MRV. Meso 2, you'd see like a slightly higher starting MEV, and you would essentially be doing what you're kind of thinking about doing, but very incrementally. And then if you did like meso 3, then that would start to look more and more like what you're talking about. But there's still definitely a benefit to starting low and working up.
Yeah. So a good way to think about this, Arena, is if somebody asks you a question like, your first week of training, you're doing 17 sets. He's like, why don't you do 10? What's your answer to that going to be? You're going to be like, well, I wouldn't grow at 10. Wrong. He'd be like, yeah, you would. It's your MEV. You're like, okay, I would grow. He's like, okay, so why aren't you starting there? You're like, and I don't know, because I just want to do more. Well, that's not a really good answer.
Because I'm a masochist.
Exactly. Second question. What do you think the MEV, MRV, MAV is for the neck? No clue. Jeff Nippard knows. So follow Jeff Nippard and look at his YouTube and tons of neck stuff. No idea. Question 3. What exercises do you personally hate or dislike, and why? It's a funny question.
That's a whole episode.
That's a whole episode. James and I will each pick one. I hate rope overhead tricep extensions because I don't feel a fucking thing in my triceps. It's only shoulder and elbow pain. But I'm not recommending that you don't do that, because that stimulus to fatigue ratio is super individual. James, what you got?
What's it called? Reverse hyper. That one, nothing. Nothing.
Nothing. It just my lower back starts to get tired. I don't even know what that's supposed to. That's supposed to just
awkward.
train the lower back.
I think there is like a therapeutic use for it for people with back pain, but from a training perspective, a non-rehabilitation training perspective, nothing.
Louis Simmons is going to kill you for that.
I know.
Question 4. What do you mean when you say fatigue accumulation with weeks of training besides being mentally being fatigued and increased injury risk on some joints? What is the actual like fatigue accumulated over the weeks? There's a bunch of different. We just give you 2 examples. So in our book, Recovering from Training, we actually give an exhaustive list of fatigue factors. One easy one is muscle damage. Muscle damage accumulates over the weeks, and joint connective tissue damage as well. And another one is hormonal alterations. As fatigue accumulates, you tend to exhibit more catabolic and fight or flight hormones chronically elevated, like cortisol, for example. And anabolic hormones tend to decline in either their concentration or their effect or both, like testosterone, for example. So it's one of those situations where you may, not really want to have a lot of cortisol, a lot of testosterone. You may not want a lot of muscle damage and nervous system disruption and so on and so forth. And that all comes into fatigue. James.
Totally. Yeah. So I would say check out Recovering from Training on that one, because that delves into that quite a bit.
Difference between men and women in hypertrophy strength. Women start at a much lower amount of hypertrophy and strength. They seem to gain at pretty decent rates compared to men, but they also, women relatively can handle much higher frequencies and much higher average loading paradigms per session and much less rest. So if you look at a women's program, you would look like it would kill a man, which probably would. And that's so those are the biggest differences.
Yeah. And men, I think statistically, like lower body, women and men tend to be similar, but upper body is like vastly different. Just by default, men have a much more upper body strength.
Yep. All right, next one. I have a low enough body fat percent to see my full abs and have muscle definition and some striation. I'm working harder on getting a bigger V taper. My question is, what about the other muscles besides the chest, delts, and lats? Nope, those are pretty much the muscles that I would train.
Yeah.
Yep. Number 2.
Don't be fat.
Don't be fat. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Brad Schoenfeld saying that since recovery is a limited capacity, you could then, for example, let your other muscles rest or be at MEV and just go nuts on one body part? Areem, when you finish reading How Much Should I Train, you will see an entire chapter on just that exact recommendation, but a little bit more specifically, how much to reduce volumes by, how to make sure you're pairing your MVs and MAVs and so on and so forth. So absolutely, that's definitely a thing. The way to execute that is described in depth in that book.
Also, just for the record, Brad Schoenfeld has not coined the idea that recovery is a limited capacity. People have known this since people have been alive.
Yeah, this is Brad Schoenfeld saying something that most people in the field agree with, which says a lot of it's right on. So.
Not disputed by anyone ever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's not just
except for the guy from South Africa, Noakes.
Tim Noakes. Yeah, he did fuck that guy.
Only him, but he doesn't count.
Yeah. Fatigue's all in the mind, man. I for some reason gave an Australian accent.
Yeah, good enough.
No. Giant wild animals, play a lot of rugby, talk funny. Australia, South Africa.
Same. It's the same.
3. Next question. How would you coach a beginner that just wants to be clear? So like clear muscles that are see-through, I assume. The type that would take Zac Efron as elite level. That's really funny. It depends on if they want. Also, I guess the question is asked. They don't want long-term. I would introduce them into a caloric deficit. That would be number 1. Make sure their activity levels are high. And I would also put them on a program that trained them 3 to 4 times a week, focusing largely on upper body to develop muscular hypertrophy. Usually most exercises in the 5 to 10 rep range, emphasis on good technique, and slowly bump up the intensity and volume or loading and volume as needed, and just progress until they simultaneously grow muscle and lose fat until they look really, really cool. And then either one of 2 things, they look cool enough to where they think they're good, and then they can coast, or they can look cool enough to where they really start to get buy-in and start to ask you, okay, what do I need to go to the next level? And then you can train them in a more periodized fashion.
Sounds great.
Next question. Can you check your Instagram? I sent a pic. Irene MC Told you I was
No.
Irene MC.
We're not
Based
doing
on what I saw on your book and how much to train the photo and real landmarks, I added some points and see how accurate they were. I can't because I don't check my Instagram DMs from people I don't follow. I have something like 6 trillion DMs. I don't plan on doing that. Instagram's interesting, but I'm not sure if you're a real person or robots. I don't ever check that stuff. But you can feel free to ask any questions that you want.
So Irene, in the future, you made your way on to RP Plus. Welcome. You can just, if you have questions about volume landmarks and stuff, you can just ask them instead of sending them to Instagram.
Yeah. Number 5, can masturbation affect hypertrophy or strength? Sorry, don't apologize to us. Apologize to God.
Yeah. Never heard that one before.
Right. Almost certainly not in any way that we can measure, so I wouldn't worry about it. The only way I can think of is like, look, if you have a huge leg session coming up and you go on a furious masturbation binge and blow your load right before, you might not have as much oomph, but like that's really just a moot point. So you wouldn't do that anyway.
Dehydration, maybe.
Yeah, fuck, Jesus Christ. You slip a dumbbell because you have jizz on your hands. This is why James and I shouldn't have our own podcast.
Yes.
All right. Next one. I sleep at 3 a.m. and wake up at 11. My first meal is at 11, or sometimes when I wake up at 10, then a second meal at 3, then I go work out another meal at 6, and then 9, half my daily fat intake in that meal, and then another meal at 11, usually light but still very fatty, the other half my fat intake. My question is, should I space my 6 and 9 a.m. a bit more? It follows the hours post-workout, so I have a bigger appetite. No, that seems just fine.
It's fine to me.
Okie doke. Some details for that other question that we already covered. My testosterone is on the low end of normal. My doctor says that physically I don't seem to need it. Well, that's because you train with weights. And yeah, so that's an interesting perspective of a doctor to have. There's no such thing as needed, by the way. Decently muscular, 19-year-old male, 165 pounds, 12% body fat, 5'8". However, my test is otherwise. Well, it's on the low end of normal, but it's not otherwise. It means you're fine. But still, my doctor won't write me a prescription. I don't mind. I don't mind it, but if I get on TRT, how would that affect my training? Not much. Being 19 and having normal testosterone levels, TRT would affect the training almost not at all. I've been working out for 14 months. I used to be obese. Currently eating 3,400, 3,600 calories and managing to gain very slowly. Your testosterone will have very, very little impact on your gains over the next several years. The people that see a lot out of TRT are people that produce no testosterone or very, very low subclinical range. You're going to get almost nothing. If you want more details on that, James Krieger has authored a few articles on how little testosterone in the physiological range makes as far as difference.
Yeah. He's 19, right?
Yeah.
Homie, you don't need TRT. Just get in there and train.
By the way, when you start TRT, your dick stops, your balls stop working, and you have to take drugs for the entire time in addition to keep your balls working. It's a fucking complicated mess. You don't want any part of that shit.
Yeah.
Evan Gregg says, hi, Mike and James. With a week's trial period at the start of rugby season, how would you go about periodizing training to peak for this time? Would you suggest preparing for the season as normal as the season starts a week or two after the trials, or would you go through different phases and differently prepare for them? Thank you, James. I will be putting in nothing to this question. That's all.
I'm actually not understanding the question. With a week's trial period at the start of rugby season. Oh, so you mean like
Tryouts, maybe?
Tryouts? Okay, yeah, I see. So here's the thing with the tryouts. You're going to have to already come in shape. What you don't want to do is try to like periodize like a peaking approach to making the team, because you'll have your best performance at tryouts and then you'll suck the rest of the season, right? So that's no good. So my suggestion would just be to always maintain a good level of fitness, always maintain a good level of skills and tactics. Don't allow yourself to decondition in any of those areas. And you would just approach your rugby training as you normally would. Like you have your general preparatory periods where you're getting your body comp in order, either being less fat or gaining muscle, getting some basic cardio and some work capacity, getting some basic hands-on-the-ball skills, stuff like that. And then once you're into your preseason time, you move into your specific preparatory stuff and so on and so on. So I wouldn't do anything different, and I wouldn't necessarily – because here's the thing, right? So like what's the point of like trying to do a peaking protocol for a tryout? Well, it's kind of like an all or nothing effect, right? If you have a really good performance, then you'll make the team, and that's the outcome that you want. Okay, that's good. But if you make the starting squad and you suck the whole time, you're going to feel bad about it, and then you might not make the team next year. They might be like, that guy sucked dick. We're not going to bring him back. So what I would say is stay in shape, just do your normal stuff, and you'll be better off in the long term.
One of my wife is fond of a term, under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
All right. Kartik Singh asks, can I increase the mesocycle length while specializing in arm/delts? Is it won't increase much fatigue as bigger muscles would do? Well, the answer is actually in autoregulation. So as you go through the mesocycle, you will understand what your systemic fatigue is like. And if you are correct in that arms and delts are not as contributory to systemic fatigue, you actually won't feel very fatigued by the time you would normally deload, so you can do an extra week or two. Yeah, totally. But that might not be the answer. You might actually train so hard and not lower the other muscles so hard that you idea was like, oh, I'm just going to keep going, but you may not be able to keep going.
So I'm actually doing an arms delts mass specialization meso right now, and the goal is to hit your muscular MRVs, right? Not so much worrying about like extending out due to systemic limitations. So what I would say is in this case with those, because those muscles tend to recover so fast, like for me, I do a fucking arm and delt movement every single day. They recover so fast. What you really want to push is you don't want to extend your mesocycle out and never hit your local MRVs because you're worried about systemic MRVs. Make sure you hit your local MRVs. Shoot for that. And that if it ends up being the same, it ends up being the same. That's fine.
Yeah. Christopher Tolsman asked, what are the scientific principles of endurance training and how do they differ from the scientific principles of strength training? So I'll tell you this right now. They're actually the same. There's the same principles, but the details of how you apply each one of them is going to be very radically different. James and I don't know fucking dog. I mean, I can teach you 15 minutes of part of a course intro on them, but that's all I got.
The reasons why that they're principles is because they are applicable in all situations, right? That's why they're principles. So it's not when we say like scientific principles of strength training or hypertrophy training, it doesn't mean that there's different principles. It just means that how we apply the principles are contextual. And those.
Good news, bad news, folks. The hypertrophy principles book that we're coming out with in about 6 months here is going to be the same principles, just completely different application. So.
Yeah, and I mean, so like if we wanted to be really nitpicky about like if as from like a really, really anal sports science standpoint, like which principles are the ones that have like the, like no one would ever say this is not a thing. You got, you know, specificity, overload, variation, phase potentiation. Those are like, no one would ever argue. Fatigue management's one, like everyone knows fatigue management's important, but like, could you really pull up an article and they say like, oh, this is a training principle. It's like, man, maybe not. But at the same time, no one would dispute it as being something that's important and valuable. So the principles are all the same. Sometimes we take a little bit of liberties on things like individualization, fatigue management, something like that, but they're also not contested by anyone.
Right. All right. TJ Jankowski says, hey, fuckers, side note, when you were lecturers in college, would you ever answer questions framed in such an absurd manner? James and I are rather big, scary people to most people in real life. I ain't never had anybody talk shit to me in a class in real life. And no, students would never fucking try that shit because they know you can fail them in the fucking drop of a hat. So
you mostly just get like the point mongering stuff where people would be like, what do you mean? I don't understand.
When you meant squat, did you mean deadlift? Thanks for the recommendation of Blank Slate the other week. A fascinating read. Awesome. I got some more questions for you. First, ab/core hypertrophy. How much weight would one expect to gain here relative to other body parts? Like actual weight of your abs, 1 to 3 pounds over your career would be a fuckload.
Yeah. I mean, your abs are such slow twitch. I mean, your midsection muscles in general are very slow twitch. So it would be akin to like your forearm and your calf type training where it's just like you put in a lot of work. They don't grow a ton. But they do grow. It'd be very similar. I mean, the size difference is noticeable, but the type of training and the rate of progression would be similar.
Totally. I've massively increased my core work in the past month, and I've made decent strength gains in the ab movements. And considering I've done practically zero ab work in the gym, I'm thinking this could be a reason on the weight gain has been a fair bit faster, gone up from a nice low 0.25 to around 0.5 increase, without much fat increase.
That's good.
Gain. Yeah, so remember, weight gain is not determined by how much muscle you put on, it's determined by calorie balance. I have also added daily focused calf training before I'm sure I phoned it in. Excellent. I remember Menno had someone saying that calves are one of the biggest body parts throughout the whole body. I'd assume the same for abdomen, thus meaning total. Well, so you're not training the entire abdomen when you train your core. A lot of times it's just the rectus abdominis musculature.
And those are fairly
the biggest muscles in your core are your spinal erectors, right? Thus meaning total weight potential for these body parts to gain is actually more than one would suspect. Maybe for the abs. I mean, definitely the calves. It depends on if your calves grow. Some people's calves don't grow all that much. Nothing beats like the thigh. You know, like if you look at that, like that is just good. Thighs, glutes, traps. That's a big muscle.
And those muscles are also notoriously slow twitch. So although they're large, they also are not prone to being huge either.
Next question. Does maintenance volume for body parts go up during a mesocycle? If so, is that accomplished by adding 1 to 2 reps, going up in weight, and or going slightly closer to failure? Probably in no measurable way. Because remember, maintenance is super, super easy, right? It might go up a tiny little bit as you go, but even that's tenuous. But
it's
by
probably
progressing in relative intensity or relative effort, RIR, you take care of all of that, no problem.
My guess is that it does marginally go up, but that increase is offset from the momentum you generate through the training. So like you just get more, you keep the same movement or same rep range in for a while, and you just get more dialed into that movement and or rep range and just have better performance. And so it works itself
just by
out.
Strength gains, it works itself out, I think. Yeah. Which is also supported by the fact that stronger people don't have higher maintenance volumes in terms of number of sets than weaker people do. They have the same and sometimes even less because they get so strong that it's so easy to stimulate the retention of muscle mass just by lifting weights. All right, next question is, I want to change gears. I know this might not be your exact area of expertise. We'll prepare for a shitty answer. Last week you mentioned that for longevity, the biggest determining factor is body weight and substantial, subsequently calorie amount. I assume this is over the whole lifetime? Yes, correct. Well, let's see where he goes with this. I know that in elderly populations, one of the negative effects of aging is the lower desire to eat and lower carb/protein totals, resulting in muscle loss. So there's actually a very big difference between mortality and morbidity. And there's a big difference between your lifetime overall body weight and the trends of body weight towards end of life. One of the big downsides that when older people eat less, it is usually more of a cause usually more of a consequence of their failing health than a cause. Usually when people's body weight decline and they stop eating towards the end of life, they're fucking dying, bro. Like, eating more on purpose may not help the situation at all. If it's muscle mass deterioration and eating more gives them more energy and makes them more active, that can actually help. But over the course of the average lifespan, it's calorie balance. Towards the end, things, as you point out, do get a little tricky, but not so tricky because a lot of the times it's really not a whole much you can do about it. So.
Yeah, and a lot of the times it's related to their activity levels, and their activity levels are related to their capacity to actually move because maybe they've had significant bone or muscle loss at this point. So it's one of those downward spirals.
Yeah. I asked this question because over the past couple of years, I've got grandma doing some very basic strength training, starting at the ripe old age of 74.
Nice.
At the start, she was able to recomp whilst getting stronger. However, now she's been at a sticking point for some time. I personally believe that her family is more of a health risk than her weight. Frailty is more of a health risk than her weight. Would I be correct? It may very well be. Even so, at what point would gaining any strength still be somewhat unrealistic at that age? Could be now. She can deadlift 100 pounds and overhead press 10-pound dumbbells. Do we focus on maintenance and balance? I would just try to get her as strong as possible while being very much aware of fatigue management. And if she does not get stronger, that means her MRV has been exceeded by her MV, and then there's just old age and the inevitable.
And then, like, also if you're hitting strength plateaus, like you can switch to lighter loads and do higher reps at some point. You know what I mean? If she's just like not getting any stronger at sets of 10, go up to sets of 15 to 20 and just go from there.
Yeah. And he says, to add to the conundrum, I think eating more is tough on her mentally as she's been able to lose body fat and has conditioned to think skinny equals sexy. I don't think you need to get her gain a whole lot of weight. I think she can just eat more protein and veggies and fruits and healthy stuff, and she'll gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, and her health will improve a lot. You don't need to jack grandma up, but you need to get her to eat more protein and less of other shit.
So. Get grandma on that TRT.
100%. Fuck TRT, man. Trying her out. All right, last question, just for the bants. How do you guys like your level of fame? Do you get recognized in public much? I ask because I follow Charlie on Instagram, and he seems to deal with it in a fantastically unique way, barely entertaining a stupid comment or question as posts, as is his right. So the thing is, like, Charlie was always like that before any fame that he got. Charlie's the straightest shooter in the fucking world. He was straight up like, Charlie's got into verbal arguments with people on the street, like, gets out of his car, with people. When people get out of their cars to fight him, he will get out of his car to fight them. And then they realize that they're dealing
Like,
with
oh.
it, just go right back in their car.
Nope.
So I don't know, this is a big ass Korean dude. Yeah, so I understand where Charlie's coming from. And you know, it can be real tough when you get, you know, a level of quote unquote fame in social media, especially. You get the same question that was absurd the first time asked for the 150th time, and for a while it tends to upset you, and then you get used to it. I'm pretty used to it by now. And then you get some real assholes and trolls. It can upset you, but then most people, they're coming from a good place, so they just don't know. And it's, in the end, it's better to either ignore them or be nice. Charlie's probably trending in that direction by now anyway. But like, you know, fame doesn't really appeal to me at all. I don't care to be known. It's really an honor, a privilege when people recognize me. Like, I recognize the gyms a bunch now, pretty consistently. But it's so very nice to have. But I'm not addicted to it, or I can just take it or leave it. As a matter of fact, I'd probably leave it. But I understand it's a big part of my role at RP, and a big part of what makes me income is to be known for who I am. And I just really more about spreading ideas. If any of you guys meet me, and James has been one of my best friends for years now, there's nothing very super interesting about me as a person outside of my ideas. Like, I'm just like a fucking fuck off kind of guy. Like, so is James. You know what I mean? Like, so people meet me and they're like, Dr. Mike, oh my God. And it's like, I promise you, I'm going to disappoint you in every capacity other than hypertrophy knowledge, which I'm going to be excellent. So I don't know, James, how do you
Mike gets recognized everywhere. I've been like in airports and stuff, or just in like random events, and people be like, "Yo, Dr. Mike," and I'll be like, "Look at that. What about me? I never get recognized ever. I've never once been recognized."
You have chosen this.
I think people would hear my voice and maybe know my voice, but never my face. So I don't really deal with it. And frankly, I don't really want anything to do with that. If you guys have ever seen my social media, you probably get the impression like I reluctantly use social media to like help promote myself and RP, because that's how we make money. And for me, it's a necessary evil, but I don't particularly like it. And like Mike said, I get frustrated at people who are trolls or have mean things to say, or just being dickheads. Because sometimes, you know, like Mike gets this more than I do, but people they'll write something like, "Oi, James, fuck you, cunt," and you don't know if they're being serious or not.
I don't know.
You have no idea if it's a joke or if they're if you know, like. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm about to move to Montana and become like an old hermit in the woods very soon, which is great for me. But I don't know. Mike seems to handle it pretty well. Mike actually is famous, whereas like I'm like fake famous. I'm
Facebook famous.
I jokingly say like I'm the Alfred to Mike's Batman,
which is so wrong, because I'm not Batman and you're not Alfred. This is ridiculous. I much prefer. I'm like a really famous Robin to your Batman. So Robin, people know who he is, right? Batman.
Are you the short like Speedo?
No, James. Full tilt. All of it. The gayest possible Robin.
Love
only.
It. Love it.
All right, 1962. Silver age.
Bang! Pow!
Clamo.
Clamo.
You know, they always do these like these adjectives for like, what is that? That is not. What is that? Max Jenkins says, "Hello, docs. Just for clarification, last week when I used the description not lean enough to be one of the elect, the term elect was in reference to Puritan meaning of the word God's chosen few. They're predestined for salvation. It's still not a good joke, but now we're able to sleep and I'll be able to Max, highly appreciated. Love it.
We've all had some that have fallen flat.
Yeah,
good.
You're just better read than we are. So that's the joke's lost on us for our own fault. So on to a less blasphemous note, there seems to be a decent amount of both physiological logic and personal anecdote in favor of high-carb, low-fat mass. Do you guys think that physique athletes adhering to a strict high-carb, low-fat diet could aim for / benefit from more aggressive rates of gain compared to those consuming higher percentages of these calories from fat? Dr. Mike, I've heard you speak about how you've seen physique improvements after implementing a high-carb, low-fat diet. Have you found that it keeps you leaner throughout your massing phase? I'm an interesting case there. I'm not sure what I found. Definitely, the answer is yes, I have found that, but there's a lot going on. You know, a lot of supplements, a lot of different kind of training and diet, cardio, and all sort of crap. I will say though, if the hypothesis is true that the low fat, high carb massing is better in the sense of gaining weight or gaining muscle, then technically you could run it with a higher gain rate. I'm recently a bigger fan of staying a little bit leaner and not trying to push things faster. So you could run it for longer and slap another 3 or 4 weeks in the end of your mass as opposed to, or just end your mass leaner, like any one of those. I wouldn't just go faster. The thing is, going faster, it's actually profoundly hard with low-fat, high-carb massing, because you're like, oh, I get to eat all these carbs. And at the end of the day, you're like, I can't eat any more food. You look at it like, I've only had 3,900 calories. What the fuck? And then you're like, oh, I can't have anything with high fat. I'll put this in no unequivocal terms. Gaining weight is easy as fuck when you get a mix of highly palatable, mixed, high-carb, high-fat foods. As soon as anything in that equation, people switch to keto, lose a bunch of weight without controlling their calories purposefully, because once you take away carbs from fats, they're like, hey, man, do you want this thing of chicken and ranch dressing and cheese? And you're like, yeah, it sounds great. 2 meals of that later, you're like, fuck this. I don't even want to eat anymore. So the high-carb massing, it sounds super fun, and then you got a plate of white rice, however well-flavored, it's talking ground beef and chicken sitting in front of you, and you're like, man, if these were tacos, yeah. So,
yeah, I still think calories win out on that for now. So, if you go too fast, you're probably going to get too fat.
Yeah. Khalid B says, "Hi docs, I hope you're well and healthy. A couple of questions for you this week. Number one, I have a question about fatigue and adaptations. Let's assume, for the sake of simplicity, that I do 20 sets per week per each body part, and then I recover from that after doing 20 sets of chest last week, for example. I'm able to barely maintain my performance each week. Also, let's say the sets are static, so I do not increase or decrease them week to week. If I cut that volume to, say, 15 sets, but I'm able to progress faster, on the 20 sets per week, I'm simply maintaining performance. On the 15 sets, I'm able to increase reps, load, etc. Would that produce more hypertrophy despite less volume? No, it almost certainly wouldn't, because this has been directly tested. Lower volumes, so long as you can recover from them, almost always produce less hypertrophy than higher volumes. It's just reality of the matter. So with the higher volume hypertrophy thing, what you would do is see very little increase in strength and performance over the course of the mesocycle. Then when you drop your fatigue, you would see a shitload of it, because you were gaining, a ton of muscle the entire time. Whereas if you went for the performance increasing route, fuck 15, you might just go to 10 sets. You could really increase performance. But then after the next meso, your performance wouldn't go up as much, and then as much, and then as much, and you would be like quite a bit, about 4 or 5 mesos later, you'd be just as strong as someone who did the higher volumes, but be carrying less muscle. So you'd just be more neurologically efficient, which is essentially what you happen when you take a hypertrophy program and lower the volume. You're turning into more of a strength program. Not the best long-term idea.
Yeah, so that would be the 15 sets would be more of like an MAV range, which is fine.
Yeah,
the 20 would be more of the MRV range. So in terms of total magnitude, the 20 would be preferable. The 15
as a peak.
As a peak, right. So the magnitude of gain would be the highest there, whereas the 15 might be a more economical use of your time, because it would be pretty similar, just not as high of a gain, but you'd be seeing performance improvements. So that would be like a situation if you have like a sporting athlete who's doing hypertrophy training, and you are trying to prevent them from overreaching so that you can maintain a level of sharpness on skills and tactics and other things that you're training at the same time. You might say, we're doing hypertrophy, but we're just training to MAV. We're not training to MRV, because if they start overreaching, then we can't do other things. That becomes a problem. But for physique athletes, no.
Man, I'm going to do something real quick, James. Oh boy, let's hope I can pull this up pretty quick.
I'm gonna give you a reaction. Thumbs up.
Oh, man, fucking stupid Instagram.
Can you see that or no?
Bullshit. Yeah, I can fucking see it, James. Well, actually, let me see. Ooh, I do have these. Hold the phone. Ooh. Okay, so you guys are fucking lucky as fuck, because you get the biggest preview of the world. James, can I screen share real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Boom. This is going to answer the rest of your question.
Oh boy.
So here we go. These are never before seen, because they are reserved for the hypertrophy book. These are graphs that will be in the hypertrophy book. So here we have prioritizing volume versus loading over the training block. It's a mesocycle 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Whole training block. And we have 3 variables we're sort of theoretically talking about: volume, performance, and muscularity. So what you're going to notice here is the top section is something that prioritizes loading. Okay, so like you said, lower overall volume, but we get stronger over the weeks within each meso. You'll notice that the volume here is lower, right? So the volume, slow volume the entire time. And the bottom condition here is when we do higher volume without progressively loading as much through the mesos. And the volume here, as you notice, is much higher the entire time. Let's take a look at performance. Performance is going to be higher in the first meso because you're like right away you get stronger, right? And performance starts to, increases a little bit. So performance is going up. Great. Okay. Here's the thing. Performance here starts pretty low because remember this first meso, like you don't really gain much performance. Notice performance starts to rise meso to meso to meso. Two reasons. One, fatigue drops between mesos and we get a big performance boost at the end of it if you have basically a concentrated load and then drop fatigue. And two, you gain muscle every single time between these. So performance is going to go up meso to meso to meso because you're more muscular every time. But here's the real kicker. Take a look at muscularity. Muscularity goes up here pretty well, right? You gain muscle if you get stronger. This is like what a power lifter at slightly higher volumes would train like. It works. Here's the muscularity, though, starts at the same place for someone who does higher volumes. It goes up faster and eventually gets to here. Notice the performance of this individual at Meso 5 is the same. Both people are just as strong. One guy got there doing heavier weights and lower volumes. One guy got there doing higher volumes and thus less progression and load. But check this out. This person is more muscular. This Meso 5 is representative of the difference between a professional class powerlifter and an IFBB pro. This guy weighs 200 pounds and squats 800. This guy weighs 220 and squats 800. Not as impressive, but he's more jacked. This is just another way of showing you specificity. If you do higher volume mesocycles between MEV and MRV versus doing one at, say, like MEV or close to there, you get stronger for sure doing the one at MEV. But because you're not gaining as much muscle, long-term strength to body weight better, but long-term overall strength the same, and you gain more muscle this way.
Yeah, that's really good. And so that the top one example is what I was just talking about before. This is how you would do hypertrophy for like a strength sports athlete, which is like 90% of sports.
Yep, because you don't want a ton of hypertrophy. You want still performance to go up mostly, but some hypertrophy.
And you want to save a little bit of that training resources because you don't want to be overreaching the whole time. Like you don't want to be overreaching your legs or your arms to the point where you can't go to practice and do other things. So that's a handy little trick there.
Well, that'll appear.
That's all you get. No more.
They're such dicks. Like the book's coming. I promise, guys. The book is the book is done. It's just being edited. These are one of the.
Somebody's gonna make a meme of like the skeleton guy waiting for the hypertrophy book. Yep. Like the book is coming.
Over here waiting for the book. Don't mind me. He's gonna die of old age. All right. Let's see what else he says. Would that produce more hypertrophy despite less volume? No. Produce less hypertrophy despite less volume. Because of less volume. In that case, then low volume powerlifting, since the results of bigger strength increases, would yield the most hypertrophy. It doesn't, as we see powerlifters are not as big as bodybuilders. I guess that ties into fatigue in a way. If we do 20 sets to give more stimulus but more fatigue, so there's less room for adaptations. Well, so here's the thing. The way you phrased your example, you're essentially training at MRV the entire time. That's not a good idea. You need to train at MAV, which is to start at MEV and go to MRV. So yeah, if you trained at MRV the entire time, you absolutely would get more fatigue and less muscle growth. And as a matter of fact, you would never be able to survive that for longer than a week or two. So yeah, we don't want to do, if our MRV really is 20 sets, we don't want to do 20 sets every single week. So the better example would be if I start at 10 sets and go to 20, an average of 15, how does that compare to starting at 10 and finishing at 10? Then everything you said in your example would be correct. Performance will go up faster if you start at 10 and finish at 10 because you could just increase load, but it would be exactly the chart I just presented.
And this is another reason why we advocate for using auto-regulation because we have kind of like our pre-planned strategies say, I know my MEV starts roughly here and my MRV ends roughly here, but week to week you can auto-regulate that MAV to be a little bit on the top heavy or bottom heavy as you train, right? So you can go top heavy and that's what physique athletes generally will do. And you can go kind of mid-range or bottom heavy and that's what strength sport athletes will generally do. And that's what the auto-regulation's for.
Yep. Let's see what else he says. Meaning, should we actively try to minimize fatigue, or as long as our performance returns to baseline, we should worry about fatigue impacting our adaptations unless a drop in performance occurs? For hypertrophy training, this is absolutely the case. For strength training, how quickly you gain, even micro to micro, can matter. So that's different altogether. As an example, the last 2 mesocycles using MPT, for instance, I added a lot more sets for arms than what is included in the template, but since I'm in recovering and not have a drop in performance, then there isn't any benefits to dropping volume correct, not in the short term. Think perhaps I would progress faster if I do, and potentially it would actually lead to less growth. You would progress faster in strength based on neural characteristics and the fact that you're carrying less fatigue. That would potentiate more growth later, perhaps, but it certainly wouldn't result in more growth right away. There is amazing research by tons of people, and a bunch of studies show this now. The Schoenfeld and Krieger studies, the one that replicated a bunch of studies, where you'll have three groups, and this is actually really interesting. You'll have a low volume, moderate volume, and high volume group, and the growth, hypertrophy, will be lowest in the low. The moderate group will have the moderate hypertrophy, and it'll be highest in the high group as far as volumes. Volume and hypertrophy perfectly related. Strength will look like this. The low volume group will gain decent strength. The moderate volume group will gain the most strength, and the highest volume group will gain the exact amount of strength. Be like, what the fuck? So wait a minute. The moderate to high volume didn't increase strength? No, it didn't. And as a matter of fact, if you did a very high group, strength might not even improve as much over the course of the mesocycle. So that's the deal is strength fundamentally, I'm going to put this in very technical terms, strength has a lower MAV than hypertrophy in the mesocycle scale. So if you want to train to maximize your strength in a mesocycle, you're going to have to train less. This is why James and I are super big on saying if you are not regressing, adding volume is okay, because that's how you get the most growth. We don't say add as much volume as would cause the best within meso gains, because James and I can design you a mesocycle that will cause you the best gains in strength. Check it out. You start with the highest volumes, you actually drop volumes the entire time, and you go to sets of 3 and 5. You'll be strong as fuck. You'll be like, oh my God, this is the way to hypertrophy, but it's not. It's just the way to peak.
Yes. Very good.
Number 2, I am currently starting week 4 of my MPT Metabolite focus. The last day of week 3, I think I reached my triceps MRV, as I had overlapping soreness going into the session. I lost 2 reps. Yeah, that's certainly a thought.
I mean,
I just
2 reps. I'm not sold. I'm not
just
sold.
saying. Totally. You could have a great workout next time, but if you have overlapping soreness and you lost some reps, I certainly wouldn't go around telling people you've got 5 more sets in the tank. I decided to skip any movement that day that involved triceps directly or indirectly so that I could recover for the next session. Is that a good decision, or should I have continued to do the exercises despite losing strength? No, I think that's a fine decision. You could have gone either way, as long as if you've gone the other way and finished, the next session should have been lower. James, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's fine either way, like you said. And I'm sorry, I'm being a dick about this. I'm just caught up on the despite losing strength. Like you didn't lose strength. You had a 2 rep difference is like the difference between taking 30 seconds rest and 45 seconds rest. You know
right.
I mean?
It's not so super conclusive. Now, so this is actually, to James's point, this buttresses the idea that maybe you should have kept going, because if you kept going and everything was down and way down, you could have said, okay, definitely this is down. But because you just sort of tested the waters with one movement and then auto-regulated, it could have just been a bad day or a bad movement.
Yeah. And like, I'm not saying that you should be constantly overlapping in soreness, but I will say, just because you do have overlapping soreness does not mean that you've actually hit your MRV yet. So just keep that in your mind.
Yep. But also, I think choosing erring on the side of, okay, I've hit MRV is probably better than erring on the side of pull through it. So,
Yes.
Also, the first session of week 4, I lost her up on my incline bench. Okay, so now we're seeing that performance is at best flatlined and potentially falling. So now that actually does.
So, Covey, just so you can get the point, and I think Mike will agree with me on this, losing a rep or 2, even on a couple exercises, not super alarming. What the bigger indicator of like hitting your MRV on a movement will be like first set close to normal, second set bomb, like just nothing. That's when you know. If you got like 15, like 14, 13, and you're like, oh man, I should have gotten another 14. It's like, no, not even close. If you got like 15, 8, 6.
Or if you lose reps off of your previous week's best 2 sessions in a row, the more sessions in a row you can't match PRs, the more I would think you're starting to underperform. So the week 4 lost a rep on my incline bench by itself, like James put, is not much. But because you also fucked up your triceps last time and didn't perform, I'm starting to think that, look, it's probably err on the side of easy and definitely drop your volume. He says, I'm not sure if it's due to my triceps being overreached or chest. In the overreaching week, is it fine to drop reps the beginning of the week, or should it be reserved for the last session or 2 ideally? Because I do high frequency, I still have 2 more sessions involving chest and triceps. I'm also not sure what to rate those as it is the overreaching week, is still a -1, 0, or perhaps even 1 since I'm deloading next week anyhow. So good news, in the MPT, the last week's ratings go nowhere. A little trick of the trade, so don't worry about what the fuck your rating shit. It's not going to have anything to do with what happens. That's just to keep you in the habit of rating stuff. Also, it's a customer service thing. If we didn't put ratings in there, people would ask why there's not ratings in the last week. I would say that you should keep your loading the same. It is fine to drop reps in the last week. Yep. It also, he said, in the overreaching week, is it fine to drop reps in the beginning of the week? Well, you don't have a choice. You didn't drop the reps on purpose. You just can't do them. It just happened. Dubai, is it fine? Do you mean that, is this overreaching going to be super compensated? Yes. So you can have a dog shit overreaching week and be totally fine. It's not like if you start on Monday overreaching week and you underperform, you're like, that's it. We're just taking a deload now. Like, you can do one more week and have a shitty week and still have great super compensation. So I would say keep going.
Yeah, and Mike already pointed out that the rating is kind of a no point. But if that was me doing the same thing that you're doing, I would do a 0. That, for me, that would be a 0. Like, mostly the same. You don't have to do that. And if you were being conservative and saying, I'm going to err on the side of not overdoing it, you could do -1 and just say, like, okay, next time I'll just back down a little bit so I can make sure I get through the entire mesocycle all the way. Sure. But me looking at that for me, that would be like a 0, like, carry on.
Yep.
I work hard for my results, and I need my diet dialed in. The RP Diet app tells me what to eat to keep me on track and offers suggestions for changes based on my responses, giving me the freedom to choose my path. A personal digital diet coach for less than $15 a month? Yeah, that works.
Number 3, what would you suggest I do after my Metabolite phase? I'm thinking I'll probably doing RP at home program. In my state, stay-at-home orders will likely extend to mid-June, so I won't have gym access to at least mid-June. My next phase is a resensitization phase, but I'm not sure I need to do it. I have done lots of high-line work on my own part of Meso 1 of RP. I hopped directly into Meso 1 and then a week of Meso 2, but because of my gym shutdown, I stayed for 2 weeks doing basic bodyweight stuff, and I waited for equipment before transitioning to Metabolite. I would say there's your maintenance phase right there. I have adjustable dumbbells that go to 52.5 pounds. Hey, we have the same dumbbells. So that I work perfectly for my Metabolite phase. I've been massing through Mesos 1 to 3, and I'm thinking I will deload after the 4th week of Metabolite, start a maintenance phase for the first 2 weeks of the at-home gym training, then start a cut and finish the at-home program until gyms reopen, where I will transition to Meso 1 and keep cutting. But would you think a resensitization phase is still necessary? I think you're good to go.
Seems fine to me. Yeah.
4, tying into question 3, how much do deloads resensitize you to volume? Enough to buy you another mesocycle, but not another block. That's the technical answer. Say I ended up my Metabolite phase with less than 25 sets per muscle group as an example. That was my MRV. Would I still have good growth if I went to my at-home program and stopped short of my MRV, say 17 sets per muscle group the last week? Would I still have good growth if I went into the at-home gym program and stopped short of my MRV?
It would be hard to compare those things.
I can't. Yeah, it's tough to compare at home. Also, is it with a deload or without a deload? Are you saying you would get into the 17 sets? I'm not sure about that. Deloads resensitize you to volume a lot. They can buy you weeks of more volume responsiveness. So whatever that's worth to you. Number 5, are there benefits for going from MEV to MRV for strength work?
It's different.
It's very different. So we'll just actually answer this really straightforwardly. You do go from MEV to MRV in strength work anyway. You actually have no choice, because if you start at anywhere between MEV and MRV, MRV comes to you with the form of accumulating fatigue. MRV falls down, right? But because you have a choice in how to progress from MEV to MRV, whether it can be completely volume progression, you just don't increase your load at all, versus just add sets, which for hypertrophy would work pretty well, not ideally, but pretty well. And then on the other end, you could only increase the loading because strength work is so loading based and the volume just has to be in the ballpark, that James and I recommend not increasing sets unless you're just really clearly just shot way below your MEV and you're just not stimulating properly. Like you just thought it was 2 sets of squats was going to get you stronger, but you're like, man, I fucking barely feel this. It's got to be at least 4. Unless it's adjustments like that, James and I recommend that most of your increases of training stimulus, which is really what gets you from MEV to MRV, occur via loading addition through strength work. So you don't intentionally go up and up and up in volume as set numbers. We just say put more weight on the bar. James?
Yeah, that's good. So just keep in mind when we talk about the volume landmarks, I think maybe we don't always do a good job about this. I think people get really caught up on the volume part, and really what we're saying is like for any outcome, right? There is an appropriate blend and intersectionality of frequency, volume, and intensity. And when we're talking about hypertrophy, that's usually what we talk about the volume landmarks. We're assuming that frequency is in a reasonable range, intensity is in a reasonable range for hypertrophy purposes, and then the thing that we're modulating at that point is volume, right? And so for strength and anything that's more intensity-based, we kind of have a similar but flipped script where we say, we talk about the volume landmarks, but the big driver is intensity, so frequency has to be reasonable for strength, so that might change.
Yep.
Intensity has to be reasonable for strength, and then we can modify, volume a little bit accordingly. And so in this case, you would see substantially lower volumes if you're trying to train for strength.
Yeah, lower volumes.
And probably frequency as well.
Yep, and you modify the intensity more. And then he says, say I wanted to incorporate some strength work into maybe holistic template hypertrophy mesos going forward. I do complex in 3 to 5 reps, and the rest of the exercise between 8 to 20. I know that rising volumes, there is rising fatigue, where you're barely maintaining performance as the cycle progresses, which is good for hypertrophy, but that indicates you're overloading with higher volumes week to week. What about strength? Should I keep the compound exercise set static to avoid fatigue? Well, so here's a problem for you. Yes, you should. So you can push heavier weight. You can. But the problem is, welcome. This is phase potentiation 101. This is why periodization exists. Your hypertrophy work will still increase in volume and will poison, fatigue-wise, your strength work. Yes. So you can increase your sets on squats and deadlifts or not. You're going to get fucked either way because your hack squats and leg curls are going to fuck you with the fatigue they're leaching out because you're increasing those. This is why hypertrophy and strength at the same time is not the best idea. So yes, the best answer is don't do them at the same time, like James grunted before we started this question. The second best is definitely keep the compound strength stuff to the same sets and reps and just increase load. And the third worst is to progress those and everything else, which would just be a total disaster.
And Khalid, like you're not alone in that you probably have goals that are some blend of like, I want to be jacked and I want to be strong. That's like a very common thing for dudes. But the best way to get there is to have focus periods of getting jacked and then another focus period of getting strong and then rinse and repeat as you see fit rather than trying to do both at the same time. They end up interfering. Although they seem synergistic because you're just lifting weights and lifting heavy weights, right? They do interfere as Mike already described. So you have so much more success getting jacked and more strong if you just did 3 mesos of hypertrophy and then 3 mesos of strength rather than trying to do them both at the same time.
Yeah. Khalid's a sharp guy because he goes, I guess going from MV to MRV on other exercises will increase fatigue regardless. So perhaps for a strength, a specialized phase is needed. Absolutely. Where sets remain the same to avoid fatigue. Exactly. And not only sets remain the same or mostly the same, you would do less accessory work that would just make it so that more of your volume came from these big compounds, and that would free up even more recovery ability.
Yeah, definitely.
Alio says, hi, gents. 2 questions today. Question 1, I'm planning a mesocycle. Planning meso 2 of lockdown training. I'm considering using metabolite work. Is there any advantage or disadvantage to programming metabolite work for all body parts at the same time? Nope, that's totally fine, especially if it's all you can do. Or alternatively, periodizing each muscle group to do metabolite training at different times. Just hypothesizing, but could the higher circulating lactate from one muscle group impact the others and reduce the effective novelty for the other muscle groups? Almost certainly not. Your circulating lactate from metabolite training barely affects muscles. The amount of lactate, so I'll put it this way. If muscle is generating its own lactate, or the muscle fibers, the muscle cells around a cell are generating it, or that cell is generating it, the intracellular lactate is fucking enormously high. You cannot get that much lactate from one muscle to another because you would have a blood acidity that would fucking kill you. You would be dead. So the amount of lactate that gets into the blood is a fraction of what we have in the cells, in the muscle cells, and that'll never, ever, ever in a fucking million years get to other muscles around it. Like, you can't get a tricep burn so gnarly that your biceps start burning. It's not going to happen. So not a concern in my view. James?
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say like it's perfectly fine to do occlusion training or metabolite training. I know in this lockdown situation at home, it's kind of tough. If you can have at least 1 session per week per muscle group where you're just doing more traditional kind of straight sets, maybe even for higher reps, that's fine. I would say it would be slightly more advantageous than just doing pure metabolite training for everything, because that's just going to peter out relatively quickly. I think you'll get a little bit more out of it. Like if you're training chest, for example, have one day where you're doing push-ups, maybe 10 to 20 or maybe upwards of 30 reps, and then have another day where you're doing like more metabolite or type chest work, and that would be fine. If you just did all metabolite all the time, it'll be interesting for the first week or two, and then by week 3 and 4, you'll just be like, so.
Question 2, I'm increasing frequency within a mesocycle 2x to 3x for some muscle groups. Does it matter if in the 2x frequency sessions, volumes are higher for 1 to 2 weeks than in the 3x frequency sessions? No, as long as the average volume goes up, which it will. For example, week 1, 10 sets of biceps, 2 by 5 in sessions. Week 2, 12 sets of biceps, 3 by
You're talking about doing frequency changes within the mesocycle?
Oh, within. I thought, fuck, I just like read in my mind, I read that between. Don't change frequency within a mesocycle. Just don't do that. And yes, technically speaking, week 2, 12 sets of biceps, 3 by 4. This probably would even out to be roughly the same hypertrophy. In other ways, this would not be a progression. So you might as well just put more sets here.
And the amount of variability it introduces to your mesocycle is just like astronomical. But so between mesos, fine. Within meso, no.
Not wise. Would the higher frequency but lower per session volume be less hypertrophic after doing slightly higher volume sessions? Yes, but you get more sessions, so it balances out. Or would increased total weekly volume overrule this? I think it just probably balance out. This is not a progression. Don't do it. Thanks for the question, Ollie. All right, Mr. Hacker, Daniel Hacker, the one who hacks. Are there any movements you adopted during quarantine training that you hadn't done prior to quarantine that you actually think will stick in your program or that you will add to future mesos? James, I know this doesn't apply to you because you've always trained at home. I have found that the super heel elevated squat holding a plate or dumbbell in a 20 to 30 rep range has actually been awesome, but I truthfully would have never done it in normal gym settings, but I would likely use it as a lighter quad variant instead of maybe leg extensions to failure. Top pause, barbell bent over rows in the 10 to 15 rep range and front foot elevated barbell split squats in the 10 to 15 rep range have also been awesome. For the lose keep. For sure keeping. Similar question, has quarantine made either of you guys, well, let's get that in a sec. So James, I guess this question does not apply to you because you don't have quarantine. And affecting your training, I would say the one exercise I will keep is the superset of chest rows, barbell rows to the chest, to the nipple line, to barbell rows to the tummy. It's actually been a really, really great movement that I really, really liked. Similar question, has quarantine made either of you guys revisit your technique on certain exercises a bit more? So, and you might had, if you had a gym and any machine you were available to you, maybe retooling some exercises in the past didn't work for you, now they really do. This has happened to me, particularly with dips in this past meso. I was down on them for a while, now I'm grooving. Yeah, skull crushers with a barbell, I've retooled my technique a little bit, mostly so my joints didn't hurt. And also, I've been dealing with some shoulder pain in my right shoulder and had to retool my lateral raise technique and incline dumbbell fly technique in ways that are not optimal remotely. And as soon as my shoulder gets better, I'll be going back to the old techniques.
Yeah, right on. I've had to revisit my upright row technique a little bit just because I've had like a nagging, because I'm doing the arms delts emphasis, and there's just a certain range of motion where it causes like clicking and pain, and I had to do a kind of an overhaul, and it worked out fine. You know, it's one of those things where it's just like a little tweak sometimes goes a long way.
Yeah. Fictional Funkness says, number one, I've heard you say that low MRV isn't always a bad thing for hypertrophy. So lower MRV is always a bad thing for hypertrophy if it comes from anything except for this one thing, your faster twitch muscle fibers. A lot of times, so the way I said that and the way I meant it is if someone has a low MRV, it might be because of the fact that they're very fast twitch oriented, and that's the good thing that keeps them growing. So just because someone has a low MRV doesn't mean that they're going to benefit from having a higher one, and especially don't try to get a higher one by expanding your work capacity pointlessly and reconverting fibers away from that. And then he says, so I've heard you say the low MRV isn't always a bad thing for hypertrophy, but what about for strength? Apart from diet and sleep, what are the best ways to improve MRV for strength training? I'm assuming some cardio, but maybe not. Definitely not cardio, because remember, if you do cardio for strength training, you're just going backwards on adaptations. Just doing more strength training helps to expand your strength MRV and makes you stronger. Although that has a point, I would say that low MRV for hypertrophy training is not always bad because of the faster fibers, and it's even more not always bad for strength training. So if someone can't do high volumes and they're a hypertrophy trainee, then I'm a little bit worried about if it's coming from some other place, but they could still be getting great gains, whatever. But if someone has very low work capacity and they want to train for strength, I'm not really very concerned about that, because the amount of low MRV you'd have to get in the way of your strength training would have to be really, really, really fucking low.
Yeah, and this is another one of those classic phase potentiation examples where most of the models used suggest either doing work capacity or hypertrophy training to potentiate gains in strength and power down the road. Yeah. One of the reasons is because strength training is so rigorous that a lot of people with low MRVs for strength will hit like one set of 6 and then just be fucking dead for the rest of the week. Yeah. So one of the ways you can do that is by building a big base of work capacity through either hypertrophy training or just kind of more like sport work capacity type training. And then when you get to your strength block, you can actually tolerate doing a pretty substantial amount of strength training rather than only being able to hit like a couple sets per day and not getting much out of it.
That's what Doc Stone used to call getting in shape to train.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 2, when, if ever, are EAAs or BCAAs a good idea? Well, coming close to say never. And EAAs are incredibly available in the whey protein, so just get whey protein. Or egg or soy or any of those other ones.
Yeah.
Thanks, Docs. James, get a haircut.
I'm going to quote a very wise man who once said, "I do what I want."
That's
you can fictional funkness. You can suck a turd to a point and stab yourself with it. What do you think of that?
Nice. Holy shit. Preferably into a blood supply so you get sepsis. All right. Peyton Down says, "Hello, gentlemen. I've heard both of y'all agree in saying that training the soleus is almost pointless, but I want all the calf length and size I can get. I've been training the soleus along with gastroc for a few years now. Should I stop training my soleus or put on a maintenance phase forever? Thank you. I watch from Gunsan Si, South Korea every week." Well, that's really cool. Listen, South Korea is a terrible place with South Koreans, which are terrible people. I would just leave. JK, two of my very close friends are genetically from South Korea, if that makes any sense. I will say this. No, you can keep training them, but look, if you're not seeing any difference or any gains and you put them on maintenance and nothing happens, then yeah, just it's really all on you. Sure, training them is going to make a difference. James and I just say it's going to make a very, very small difference, and it may not be worth your time. So, Peyton, I would re-ask your question to yourself.
And I'm fairly confident that any kind of knee straight calf variation will if not entirely, at least partially hit a soleus MV.
Absolutely. Brad Schoenfeld is big on this too. He always says, look, when you straighten your knees, the soleus doesn't stop working. Just exactly. The gastroc also helps. So
yeah. So I would say you can just do straight knee versions and you probably get an MV there. I have a hard time imagining that you would need more direct work than that.
Yeah. All right. Erno Toivonen says, "Hi, Mr. Doctors. Number 1, several quote-unquote experts have said that enhanced people sustain protein synthesis for much longer time than natural people do. So natural people should train the same muscle more often and enhanced people more scarcely. For me, that sounds like bullshit bro science. You agree?" Well, the thing is, I'm not aware of any fractional synthetic rate studies, time course studies on enhanced people. So I have no idea where the fuck they got that. Also,
seems
it depends
backwards.
on when you become, yeah. Who knows? So it depends on when you become enhanced. If you become enhanced in the middle of your natty career, of course, every single exposure to training weights is going to make you grow muscle for longer and more muscle. The area under the curve will be bigger. The thing is, if you become enhanced at the quote-unquote right time, which is the end of your natural progression, it just basically allows you to eke out natural gains for longer. The behavior doesn't really change fundamentally. So now, having said this, enhanced people both grow more muscle for longer after any given training session. If you compare twins, for example, training the same amount of time, also they don't lose as much muscle session to session to session. So they can recover faster session to session to session and benefit even more from high frequency training. So that is to say, enhanced people should, if they want their optimum gains, natural enhanced people should both train at a higher frequency, period. Yeah. But not too high of a frequency that we can't recover. That's it.
Yeah, that would seem to be in line with the benefits of using enhancement, is that you could feasibly train more frequently and thus expand.
Or you could train less frequently and get the same
gains. Yeah.
I don't know why the fuck you do that. Man, there's guys I've literally heard people say, man, the reason I run trend is I can just eat whatever I want and not get fat. And I'm like, wow, you're destroying your health and psychology for that?
Man,
really?
It's also you're just a very fragile person. You can't just fucking deal with it like a normal person. You can't just diet and train like everyone else.
It's really like, that was really pathetic. Number 2, some people, I guess always powerlifting oriented, do deadlift sets with a long pause between each reps. A friend of mine, for example, did 6 reps, but the set took over 35 seconds, even though he free-falled the bar always. He is jacked and pretty strong, though. Isn't this causing ridiculously high fatigue needlessly, or does this actually have some benefits? So I don't think the pauses between reps cause any fatigue. It actually lowers rep-to-rep fatigue, so you can try harder on each rep. And the powerlifter has to do that because he's training for a 1 rep at a time sport. Is that a good use of your time? Is the stimulus-to-time ratio very good for that? No, it's terrible, which is why bodybuilders don't do that.
I would say there's some diminishing return, even on the rep to rep scale, where like after, don't quote me on a number, I'm just spitballing, but like, let's just say like after 20 seconds, your ability to get the next rep is not enhanced to a tangible degree.
You time yourself out.
Yeah. So there's probably like diminishing returns on that at some point. But this is one thing why they use what we call cluster sets in speed and power development, where you can have somebody do like a clean pull and then they'll wait like 5 or 10 seconds deliberately and then do another one so that they can maximize the power output on every single repetition. So that idea has been around for a while.
Number 3, best time during the mesocycle / program to get infected with the Wuhan 19 COVID coronavirus. My theory is that after a few days into a deload to be the best when fatigue has fallen significantly, enabling the body to have most of its strength to fight it. I'm not totally serious with this, but
I can't even plan this out. Why are we?
Yeah, like
you get sick or you don't.
I'm not totally serious with this, but I have been giving this a lot of thought since I went to visit my parents, especially my mom, might have some risk of serious complications if infected, and in general, live normally. The way I see it, I'm a healthy, active 33-year-old who will have only mild or even no symptoms from the virus, and anyway, with high probability, get it anyway at some point. So why shouldn't I just get it over with? Well, so I don't know how you plan on getting it if you're going to get it over with. This way I would be in control. Also know for certain I have suffered it already. Of course, I would need to find an affected person and French kiss him or her to achieve. So practical side of doing this isn't easy. So I would say actually at the very end of a deload is when your immune system is superpowered. And that's when getting it is the best idea, not midway through. But the rest of your question is both hilarious and insane.
I was having like a daydream of like 28 days later zombie, like vomiting on Erno, like just like,
I don't feel anything. Erno would be the guy because he's fucking Finnish. He would be the guy that like the zombie virus gets in his mouth and he's like, I don't feel anything. And then he just never gets sick, just never becomes a zombie. You're like, really? That's it? Huh?
That's it, huh?
I suppose the zombie virus is asymptomatic for many people. All right, number 4, is strength-oriented training during weight loss diet accompanied with resensitization okay?
No.
For example, 2 shorter mesos, 30 weeks plus deload week after 3 hypertrophy mesos, rep ranges 4 to 10, less volume, no isolation, movement, small frequency. No, because when you're losing weight, so a lot of times strength training relies on 2 things. 1, it relies on lower fatigue environments to get you your best training. And 2, that training in weight loss has to supply enough volume to keep you from losing muscle. And strength training, first of all, weight loss fucks it on the first, and it might not even do enough on the second. So it's bad either way you slice it.
Yeah, absolutely. And trust me, it's not just a theoretical thing. Like, been there, done that multiple times. It just doesn't work.
Reading them Lyle McDonald articles where you're supposed to just like try to train for strength for 16 weeks of a diet and just turn into Lyle McDonald. It sucks.
Mike, have you seen this guy on Instagram is Reps in Reserve?
Yeah, somebody sent it to me. I think it's some guy that like really hates Jan Fries or something like that, because I'm pretty sure like most of them.
He takes so many pot shots, and he's taken a couple like kind of light ones at us. It's funny.
Yeah.
Like I'm not butthurt about it. His shit's funny. Like he calls everyone atrophy coaches, and he's like,
I didn't think it was funny, but like funny. I thought it was it's some banter. It seems like he just really, really has it out for like Jan Fries, as far as I could. Also, like some of the memes are in German. You're like, okay, you're a German guy.
Yeah. He's really big on like, he hates the maintenance phases. He hates 4 RIR, and he hates people who weigh like 60 kilograms.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. It was funny.
Easy to hate. All right. Mark Conway says, Ari, Mike, and James. I always read that in Jamaican.
Me too. That's same.
As always, thank you both for your stellar tutelage last week. I'm now in the final week of my modified version of the Metabolite phase from 5-day male physique template. When training everything to failure and subjecting myself to volumes I wasn't sure I'd survive, e.g. 17 and 18 sets per week for chest and back respectively, and I'm actually thriving. Wow.
Nice.
My pumps and performance are still great, but body weight is steadily increasing too. Whilst the gains are good, I'm at the upper limit of what I'm willing to accumulate fat-wise, 20 to 25%. My questions
I
are...
feel your pain there.
I believe it's called fatness, not pain, James.
That's true.
Shut up, asshole.
Lay off, I'm starving.
Oh, I'm starving. Or like Stan's sister in South Park.
Turd. Shut up, turds.
I like when she occasionally like saves all their lives or does a really good thing, and he's like, "Hey, thanks a lot." She's like, "Shut up, asshole!" Like, "Oh,
yeah.
geez, I guess we're not friends." Number one, if my performance over the week is great and I don't feel too fatigued, should I add another week and potentially more volume based on soreness and attempt to reach my MRV? Would you just recommend simply deloading as planned, using my numbers to adjust future mesocycles? Yes, this last one is almost always the best.
Last one.
Yep. All right. Number two, as per last week's advice, I plan to start a resensitization phase after my deload. I'll be using resensitization mesocycle from the 5-day MPT as an outline. However, as I only have access to 9-kilogram dumbbells and can't increase intensity week to week, how would you both recommend I structure progression? Am I correct in thinking I should keep the volume low throughout, training around 3 from fail? You can train 3, 2, and even 1 from fail. Just make sure you cut the sets by a lot.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be heavy. That's one thing that a lot of my clients have been kind of whinging about, and just say, it's fine. Like, you can just basically do the same stuff we did last time, just a lot less of it, and it will be fine.
Yeah. Number 3, I plan to maintain my body weight during the resensitization period. Once the gyms are open again, I'd like to start cutting. Would you recommend I undergo another strength-oriented resensitization phase at maintenance calories before cutting to regain some strength? Or would I jump straight into a cutting phase using basic hypertrophy meso 6 to 12 range with no real detriment? I don't know. I'm 50-50 on this, James.
Unless you have like really strong strength aspirations, I would say it's unnecessary.
Yeah. You'll regain a lot of strength during your first meso of cutting.
Yeah.
Bonus question, favorite DBZ saga and why? I would have to say Cell Saga simply because that's
Cell's
when
great.
Vegeta... Oh, sorry. So Android, late Android, early Cell Saga, when Vegeta ascends to Super Saiyan for the first time and when he ascends to Ultra Super Saiyan for the first time.
That's really good. I don't know if this is within this context because he did say DBZ, but actually I really liked the Dragon Ball Super, the Galactic Tournament story arc was really awesome.
I gotta get into that shit.
It was awesome. The first half,
the Broly movie.
It's good. It's good.
The recent one.
It's not like mind blowing, but it's good. It's worth a watch.
Okay.
It deviates from the original a little bit. Yeah, no, the first part of Dragon Ball Z Super, like the first half, is like okay. It's kind of like a collection of the movies and then some downtime. But then the last half, because I got through the first half and I was like, dude, this is lame. And then Marcos was like, no. And I was like, yeah, Marcos, you've given me bad anime advice before. I don't know. He's like, no, trust me, just keep going. Like the last part is really good. And he was right. And kudos to him because the last half is really good.
That's when they do the Basic Instinct or whatever shit.
Yeah. I mean, like it's more of that stuff, but like the actual they did a really good job of like introducing new characters who were all like really interesting, and they did a really good job of revisiting old characters in the show and giving them like a moment in the spotlight. And I really appreciated that. So all the characters that you're used to are there, and instead of like Krillin and Yamcha just sucking, they actually have like little moments of like
that's
awesomeness.
Great. I like to see shit like that. All right. It says, thank thee both in advance, sending both of you and your families kind thoughts in a spirit bomb-like fashion. Jesus Christ, that's fucked up. You're going to kill our families.
Yeah, Jesus.
All those kind thoughts. You know what's funny is like the animals and the plants give him like Goku kindness and he uses it to fucking kill somebody.
I know. It's like kind of like a Care Bear type power where he's like soaking in their love and their kindness, and then he's like, die.
Yeah, fucked up. All right. Al-Fadul. Hi, doctors. I'm currently studying BSc in nutrition. What are your recommendations to start coaching? And where can I find resources on RP Plus about periodization and making workout plans? Well, so in the videos,
that's pretty much all of RP Plus.
Yep, always our videos are where you should go.
Somehow you got to this part of RP Plus and you missed that stuff. Sure. What happened?
Yeah. So I wouldn't look in the webinars. I would just look in the videos section, weekly videos about all that and different courses. And then as far as starting coaching, I would start coaching your friends and family for free. And then when you do a good job with them, you advertise it, and then other people ask you, and then you charge them a little bit of money, and you go there.
Yeah, that's a very, very sound advice.
Eli Holland says, greeting, gents. Thank you very much for your response from last week. Oh, I just swallowed air. That hurts.
Ooh.
You ever do that?
Yeah. And like If you feel it like push out your
Yeah.
throat. Yeah.
Fuck. All right. Thank you very much for your response from last week. To clarify, the concentric training that I was talking about was basic barbell lifting, like barbell overhead presses, push-ups, bench press, push press, etc., not concentric only training. Aha.
Oh, okay.
As an example, upper body pressing routine might be barbell push press 3x3, barbell overhead press 3x5, push-ups 3x AMRAP, headstand ab work 3x5, candlesticks, dragon flags 3x5, planks 3, all between 7 to 10 RP are appropriate. I am making progress in all my exercise, but I feel that intra-session fatigue is limiting the amount of high-quality volume I am able to do for my core at the end of my workout. The next day, my core feels just a little worked, and I could have done more volume and sent a larger stimulus while still being able to recover. Would it be reasonable to split some of the core work into either 2-by-day workout or having it dedicated directly to core work? I would say that 2-a-day split for core work is great. Would you see any benefit to doing core work first in the session, then barbell stuff? No, that would be backwards, because then your core would fucking limit you even more in the barbell stuff.
Yeah, you could do that on a day that maybe if you just had some like lighter dumbbell work that you were doing and it wasn't super core intensive, but definitely not on any day where you're doing like a push press or anything like that. No. Yeah, I would just split it up into 2 sessions. Just come back to it.
Yeah. You had mentioned in someone else's response last week that while gymnasts are lean and fit, gymnastics training is inefficient for hypertrophy. Do gymnasts spend any time doing barbell training for strength? Not. Yeah, modern gymnasts do, but they didn't used to. If they don't do barbell training, are they missing out on something? Absolutely, they're totally missing out on peak strength and on transfers it gives. Here's a good example of barbell training, right? We don't even have to say barbell. Weighted dips, right? Because gymnasts just do a lot of dips usually, and that's how they get really good at dipping strength. If you do weighted dips, you get way stronger, way faster, and it transfers way, way better. Movements replicating the iron cross in gymnastics can be loaded in the gym, for example, with dumbbells, and you can progress to doing that movement better than you can progress just. So the thing, most of gymnastics training is traditional, in the sense that all they had was the gymnasium and all the instruments there. Absolutely barbell training, dumbbell training, gym training, hilariously, which is not gymnastics, is absolutely enhancing.
Yes, there's another reason why a lot of gymnastics coach haven't used a lot of weight training is because they are under the impression that lifting weights just makes them big and heavy, which would be a major disadvantage for gymnastics, which there's a hint of truth to that. So all gymnasts have to find their optimal competition body weight and body composition. There's a power to weight ratio that they have to consider. But they can use strength training to get stronger without necessarily putting on a lot of size, or any size for that matter, frankly, if you can control diet. So there's a huge benefit, absolutely, to doing dedicated strength training in addition to gymnastics training.
Yep, 100%. As far as biomechanics, questions about shoulder flexion extension, lateral abduction, adduction, I realized that was lack of specificity, that I was essentially asking for a dissertation on shoulder biomechanics. No worries, dude. Specifically, I was looking to understand the muscle groups that are used during those movements when the arms are above and below 90 degrees. 90 degrees with respect to what is my next question. I guess from here.
I mean, 90 degrees could be like abducted or it could be flexed, right? So there's a whole like range in between there. So, going to 90 degrees for straight out would be a lot of front delt, right? Just flexion. Going out to the side, abduction would be a lot of, lateral delt, and then some of the shoulder girdle muscles as well. Going up and above, it gets a little bit different, but it's still a lot of the same. Like once you go past 90 degrees, this is something I would say is needlessly nitpicky. If you can look it up, the more you go above 90, the more the shoulder girdle starts to rotate. And so you start to see like a lot more activation of other muscle groups. And we can go through all that stuff, but it's why. It's, you know what I mean?
So he actually says, in a similar question, I'm having a hard time understanding some of the muscle actions that are going on during some calisthenic movements. Let's say we're locked out in a dip position, and then we pull our torso up onto a handstand. How are the muscles in our shoulders, back, and core being used to pull us upside down? So a lot of that's momentum, because you can't just fucking pull yourself upside down. And there's a bunch of shit. Actually a very complex movement. There's a bunch of stuff going on. You got muscles that are actively used to perform certain functions. So for example, the front delts will be big in actively doing that. Tons of static stabilizers, dynamic stabilizers, synergists. The way you can do that, though, is if you start, so here's what you do. You can read anatomy books and see origin insertions. Remember, muscles only pull, so you can figure a lot of stuff out like that. for any movement you want. Secondly, you can do the exercise of getting into that position and out of it, even if it's assisted and even if it's partial, and start to see where you feel it. Like, where are you feeling the burn? Where are you feeling the tension? Where are you feeling where are you getting a pump? You know, if someone tells you traps have nothing to do with overhead pressing, but you get massive trap pump, they're fucking clearly full of shit, and you do use your traps, right? So it's something like that.
There's also a lot of elastic component to a lot of those movements too, where the muscles are and connective tissues are preloaded and are actively recoiling you back into position in a lot of the cases. So there's like not only the contractile component, but there's also the series elastic component to the tissues as well.
Yeah. And he actually says something here that I would like to address. He says, I'm looking at it and I see as a body moves upside down, the amount of shoulder flexion increases like in a dumbbell front raise, but it doesn't seem like the anterior deltoid is doing any of the lifting because it's the torso that is moving while the arms are staying stationary. So I'm not really sure what's going on. Well, that's an easy answer. If you bench press and you're using your pecs, front delts, and triceps, the barbell moves. Do you use your front delts, pecs, and triceps? Of course you do. That's when you do push. What about on a push-up? Your body moves. The floor doesn't move. Well, it's the same fucking muscles, right? So if the front delt's job is to pull across the glenohumeral joint, either pulling the upper arm up or pulling the body to it, if the upper arm is stationary, the body goes. So it's still the front delt. Yeah. But a bunch of other shit is what I'm trying to say. Stephen Alfred, our last question for the RP Plus portion, says, Alfred.
Dude, the Batman, I don't know if I shared this with you, but there's a fucking Batman meme where it's Batman and he's like, Alfred, this sandwich is terrible. And it makes me fucking laugh my ass off every time.
It's because you know what, here's what happens. Batman gets almost killed and he comes home and Alfred motherfucker makes him an orange juice and a ham sandwich. I guess that's just what this motherfucker lives on out here. God
I want some wings or something. Come on, man. I'm hungry.
For fuck's sake, I'm a fucking billionaire. Stephen Alfred says, Dr. James, Dr. Mike, a couple of questions regarding body part specialization to cut to gain cycle transitioning. Okay. I'm a 28-year-old mid to late intermediate lifter, lifting weights for 10 years, but I've only been thoroughly periodizing volume for the last 2 to 3. Physique-wise, I do not have any clear laggy body parts, but progression has started to slow noticeably cycle to cycle. Thus far, I've only emphasized a balanced program, 5 to 6 days a week, 2 to 3 sessions for larger body parts, 3 to 5 for smaller ones, during my core hypertrophy cycles. Generally, should I consider body part specialization for my next gaining block? Yeah, sure.
Not a bad idea. Yeah.
If so, can you provide some guidance on specializing? We have a shitload of it in past webinars. We have tons of videos in RP Plus about it. For instance, how many body parts should I emphasize at a time? So there's no answer to this. The answer is you start by de-emphasizing just one muscle group and seeing how much better the training for the others get. And and fundamentally the answer is this: if your systemic fatigue is getting crazy and preventing you from accumulating local fatigue as much as you could be, that's when you start to de-emphasize. But generally speaking, what you do is you de-emphasize one muscle group for meso, and that gives you a little bit more, your training gets noticeably better for the others. And then after a few mesos, you'll realize that that's not getting noticeably better. So then you may de-emphasize 2 muscle groups and so on and so forth, whereas pro bodybuilders may de-emphasize half of their muscle groups at the same time. So.
And you'll notice that doing that with different muscle groups will have different magnitudes of impact. So if you stop training your quads or your glutes, for example, that's going to be massively, or not stop training, but train them at maintenance volume. That's going to be massively impactful. Whereas not training delts or something or biceps is going to be minimally impactful. Yep. So there's a little bit of guess and check work that goes in with that.
Yeah, and because quads and glutes cause a shitload of systemic fatigue, and when you go to maintenance volume, they free up a shitload of systemic fatigue. You could just pour into the other muscles. And then he says, for instance, how many body parts should I emphasize time? Should I emphasize a body part for consecutive mesos or one meso before emphasizing another one? Say consecutive is best. I would emphasize the same muscle groups in a block of training, 2 to 4 sequence mesocycles, and then I would resensitize and then repeat with another group of muscles.
Yep, same.
I'm currently nearing the end of a prolonged cut, 10-week cut, 4-week break, then 5-week cut. I've only cut from 198 to 182. What do you mean only? That's really good.
That's good.
But I have pushed past my previous fat set point and achieved an all-time low body fat percentage with a second 5-week cut block. As a consequence, I've had to take my calories quite low in order to limit fat gain. I'm planning to spend some time at my new level of leanness before starting again. That will not work. Don't do that. I had planned to run a reverse diet to slowly bring my maintenance calories up for 5 to 6 weeks. I would likely shoot for 75 calories a day, increase week to week. I have no idea how the fuck you're going to program that.
Dude, that's way needlessly complicated.
I followed a normal... Go ahead, James.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, finish your cut, take like 2 weeks off, keep your diet relatively tidy, and then get right into masking at that point.
Yeah. Followed by a normal 3 to 4 week resensitization cycle. With this amount of time likely be enough to establish my current body fat levels as a new set point? Absolutely not. You can't get to your all-time leanest and expect that you're now going to be your set point. It'll reset your settling point for your normal body fat like down 2 or 3%. But so basically, like if you're 5% right now, you're not going to reset to 5%. You're going to reset, like so you started at 15 and now you're 5. Normally you were around 15 normally. Your settling point now may be 12 or 13.
12, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so that's how it's going to work. So I wouldn't reverse diet like that. I would, within a week, ease into maintenance calories and just eat around maintenance calories, maybe a little bit more, because you got to gain some fat for your body to recover this kind of stuff. It's okay to gain fat after a fat loss phase. That's part of what recovers you and part of what allows you to resettle.
And really, like for this transition, you just need a little bit of resensitizing from your cut into your mass phase to keep you going. And that might be a very, you might not need an entire mesocycle in length. The key would just be take as long as you need, which might be as little as like 1 to 2 weeks. And then just keep your diet tidy mass. At that point.
Yes. Yeah. Don't balloon Java mass, slow mass, and you get the best of all worlds. And then he says, also, what training volume would you suggest for your 5 to 6 reverse diet, 5 to 6 week reverse diet before low volume resensitization? I wouldn't suggest 5 to 6, but I would say that for your first meso after, you should do high volumes to take advantage of all that eating you're going to be doing, and it's fun, and you get cool pumps. After that, in one meso of high volume training and maintenance plus eating, so a slight surplus, take your resensitization and go into really, really low volumes, and then restart the progression.
Solid. To the YouTube?
To the YouTube. I will share the screen.
Oh, man, we had a lot of questions today.
All right.
Brr, 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 brr.
Let's see. First question. What and no episode of James burps during the webinar or James shits himself? That's awesome.
I've been pretty good lately.
Yeah, you have. Caio Lurelio.
Lujeiro?
Rujeiro. Caio Rujeiro. Caio Lujeiro. I wonder if we said that wrong. Hey docs, hope you guys are doing well. Recently came out of a study on protein distribution indicating that 3 high protein meals spread over the day would lead to better gains. Then what? I don't know. So I was wondering why protein distribution seems to be more important when trying to gain muscle on an energy surplus when compared to maintaining during a deficit. Actually, there's a good reason for that. So maintaining muscle is just not that hard. So as long as you get your daily protein, it tends to work out. If you are gaining weight, if you're not growing muscle whenever you can be, taking opportunity to do that, there's no making up lost ground. So for example, if you eat 2 meals of protein per day, but miss the third one, you still get enough protein in the other 2. That 6 hours or 8 hours that you could have gone up in protein and thus grown, that's just gone. Like you're just not getting that 8 hours back. Whereas if you lose a little bit of muscle during a low protein feeding during a deficit, if you eat more protein later, you can regain that lost muscle to some extent. So there's the answer to that.
I like the question of the statement above with K-Ban. It's been weird. This last month, I watched these vids while I work out due to COVID quarantine. You guys have become my best friends.
And then Seal Chamber says, have you started having dreams that they were in too?
Oh my goodness.
All right. Riley asks, how do you adjust muscles? How do you adjust volumes for smaller muscle groups? For instance, delts and biceps basically never get sore and usually get pretty pumped after 2 or 3 sets. How do I know when to stop adding sets since they never get sore? Performance is the answer. When they decline in performance week to week. Also, how much should the first week volumes change from meso to meso? There's not a should. You use the RP sort of ghetto stimulus, MEV stimulus estimator. Like if you're getting a decent pump and you feel like you've done some work there, then stop and then see next week how sore you got and go from there. But generally speaking, they will go up from meso to meso, like usually 1 or 2 sets or something like that. James, is that typically your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say it would be weird for it not to go up a little bit if everything is the same. Like if you have the same general exercises, same general rep ranges for the most part. That would be strange, but it's feasible. You might not.
All right, last question. Last actual question here, too. James Kearney says, for an individual who cares about the big 3 and occasionally competes 1 to 2 comps a year but wants to be as jacked as possible, what would the yearly calendar look like? I was thinking of 2 mesos of hypertrophy, probably 4+1, and meso of metabolite, probably 3+1. Then a low volume phase focused on introducing a lift, specifically 3+1, strength block, and a peak. For taper, context is 5-4 male at 160, squat 413, bench 267, deadlift 513. That's a really good deadlift for someone who's 160 pounds. Roughly 10 years of lifting, age 26. So, James, I would say that you got it pretty well, except for the metabolite phase. I would just fucking toss completely and replace that with training for strength more or training for hypertrophy more in the normal rep range. I would want your hypertrophy to be more in the 5 to 15 rep range for most things, to more easily transition to strength. Outside of like lat training and side delt training, which you really could train in any rep range because it doesn't transfer to powerlifting performance, and like calves. Like that.
Yeah, I would say like your annual breakdown would be something roughly like 60% hypertrophy, 30% strength, and like 10% peaking for any particular comp that you wanted to do. That would be like a really solid. If you're not really hell bent on competing and like being a super tough competitor, I think that would be fine.
Yeah.
Because the thing is with the strength training, it's fun and it's awesome, but then it's like, it's a big opportunity cost if like being a jacked person makes you happy on a day-to-day basis and being a power lifter makes you happy once every 6 months. You know what I mean? So it's like, you might as well just do more of the hypertrophy stuff because it's something that might just make you feel better about yourself more often than not.
That is very, very good.
Whew.
We did it.
Oh, mamma mia.
Hey, why you take us so long, webinar?
It was a doozy. All right. So anything, Mike, any housekeeping stuff from you? You want to plug or got anything good going on?
Yeah, folks, follow my Instagram. I'm always sharing upcoming, like, since the COVID-19 thing has killed face-to-face interaction, I'm doing a ton of like webinars that other folks are organizing, like special projects and presentations. I've got one, I forgot what the fuck it's called, but it's some kind of summit. And I'm presenting a very, very new lecture that many people have sort of heard inklings of here, like how to proxy the stimulus from training and how to do it during training at various time points, like even how to proxy rep to rep if you're getting good stimulus, all the way to set, exercise to exercise, the end of a session and between sessions. I'm giving all kinds of cool lectures like that. I'm giving one for USAW. So if you just keep tabs on Instagram and the shit I share, and you might be able to catch one of those. That's super cool. So.
Awesome. Very good. So follow Mike on
Instagram. We have just released, and you'll be watching this, is for sure true. Actually, this happened today. It's recorded a couple days before you guys will watch it. Free at home, multiple sessions per day workout guide with a whole fucking program. So basically there's like, if you're training at home, there's workout videos and periodization and everything for a mesocycle of 8 sessions a week, a mesocycle of 10 sessions a week, and a mesocycle of 12 sessions a week. That's 2 days every single day, Monday through Saturday. So that's totally free. So get on the fucking site and get that shit and at least look at it, because it's a cool program that you could run with normal exercises when the COVID-19 thing is over. So,
folks, you are losing money not running this program. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Oh my goodness. I had another video pop up, I think today, which is Tuesday. So it's on some sport training stuff, common cardio mistakes. If you're interested in sport training, I have tons of ranting to do. So check that out. And other than that, we'll be on next week as normal. So we will catch you guys later.
Peace.